Hi everybody, and welcome back to Chapter 3 and our video series on the chapter for Sociology. We're still in Section 1 here, and Part 3 is going to talk about the concept, or continue on our talk about the concept of values. So let's get started here. Let's take a look at why we should focus on values. And I touched on this a little bit in Part 2. The passing on of values ensures our culture will survive and continue. And these values get passed down from one generation to the next. And those values have certainly allowed America to be very strong, because we have kept generally the same values since our founding, with some exceptions. Also, I tell kids in class that if you want to know what someone values, simply observe their behavior. So, for example, if I have a student in class who is falling asleep constantly, not handing in work, generally not putting forth a very good effort, and then I see that same student out on the soccer field or football field after school, and that person is all over the field. They are motivated, they are running around, they are totally engaged in the activity, I can immediately tell what that student values. That student values either physical activity or that particular sport more so than school, or at least my classroom. So if you want to understand what someone values, just observe their behavior. However, the challenge is, as it says there, not everyone lives by the same value system or prioritizes them in the same way. If I were to ask people, rank the top 5 things you believe in as a person, what are your top values? Which is an activity I do in class. We show them the traditional American values listed in the book, and students have to prioritize their top 5 in terms of their own personal beliefs on what values are more important to the survival of our society. And often you have very different answers as to what the prioritizing of those values are, and that can cause some difficulties. So, for example, as a society, right now we're about to have a political election, and there's a lot of key issues facing our country. One of them is, say, immigration. Now, Democrats, for the most part, when they are referring to the concept of immigration, particularly illegal immigration, tend to focus on the value of humanitarianism, which is one of the core values of America. Humanitarianism basically takes the standpoint of, with regard to immigration, we all come from immigrants in some way. Whether our ancestors chose to come here or were forced to come here, we all originated from different countries. So in a way, we are all immigrants, and many times the people coming from other countries are simply coming here to improve their life. And so from a humanitarianism point of view, we have to have a lot more compassion for them, and understand why they're coming here, and understand that we were just like them, or at least our ancestors were very much like them. So the value of humanitarianism is what a Democrat would tend to focus on with regard to illegal immigration. Republicans, however, might focus on the value of equality and saying, hey, in America, we observe the value, we adhere to the value of equality, which means when it comes to the rule of law applies to everybody. If I'm an American citizen and I break the law, I'm going to be punished. If someone from a foreign country comes to our country illegally, they have broken a law, and so the law applies to them too. So Republicans would focus on the value of equality as a way of explaining why they might object, or at least want more punishment and not much leniency towards illegal immigration. The point is, both Democrats and Republicans believe in the value of humanitarianism and equality. They just apply them differently and have them in terms of different priorities with regard to that concept. And you could go towards any type of political controversy, and the same thing is going to apply. So let's next take a look at, where do people get their values? And we have 5 things that are listed there. Certainly one of the biggest places that individuals are going to get their values is through their family. The family has been referred to as a person's first school, because you spend all your time with your family, parents, siblings, relatives, and so forth in your early years, and that's where the foundation of your values is generally going to occur. Now, we all come from different family dynamics, and some parents do a better job than others in terms of teaching right and wrong, but good or bad, our values tend to come from our family members. As kids get older, they tend to focus a little bit more on the values that their friends hold or their associates, and that is not always a good thing, and that's one of the reasons why teenagers especially begin to clash with their parents, because many times the parents don't like the fact that they might be hanging out with kids that may not have the same value system as the parents did. And the kids, as they get older, tend to want to surround themselves with their friends and might begin to take on the values of their peer group and break away from their parents' values. Certainly religion plays a big role in where people get their values. That has always been the case. Education, there are many things that are literally taught to kids in school in terms of what they should be valuing, in terms of always doing your best, having a strong work ethic, always being organized. Those are some of the academic values that are going to allow people to become better students. And certainly the media, right or wrong, good or bad, we do learn a lot of our values by watching television. When you look at and ask the question, where does our country get our values? Well, you can look around and take a look at the historic documents that are out there. We'll take a look at some of the more important speeches that have been given. Certainly, we already mentioned the religious aspect, that many of our founding fathers came to America seeking religious freedom, and they were a part of many of the Judeo-Christian value system, and so it's no surprise that when you look at the founding of America, you see a lot of that religious values, that religious doctrine within particularly the historic documents, whether it's the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. You see a lot of references to religion. Now, of course, that causes somewhat of a problem, because in America we have the freedom of religion. There is no national religion. However, if you did look at the historical documents, you are going to see the word God and other religious references in our historic documents. So some critics will say, how can you possibly separate church and state when our state was founded on religious doctrine? So it's an interesting concept, and there's valid points on both sides. And that's why we as a country still struggle with that, with school prayer, with laws permitting or preventing things like abortion, gay marriage. All those things have kind of a foundation of certainly values, and many of those values come from religious doctrine, and not everybody is in agreement as to how the government should handle those situations. If you did want to look around society and say, all right, well, if I wanted to study American values, where could I go? Well, here are some of the various places that you could go that a lot of people would recognize as identifying many of the key values that our society has. Certainly, if you listen to or read Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, he talks about what the core values of America are and should be, and how they are not being addressed towards African Americans at that time. Ronald Reagan gave a very famous speech in Berlin when there was the Berlin Wall, and it's called the Tear Down This Wall speech, where he talked about the value of equality and freedom and so forth. Certainly the Declaration of Independence, Martin Luther King's letters from a Birmingham jail did a very good job of outlining what America should be about, and how he was very disappointed that that is not the case. Brown versus the Board of Education, if you look at the majority opinion of that ruling, a lot of values, traditional American values, show up in that. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the Four Freedoms speech during World War II, and FDR's second inaugural address during the Great Depression and so forth, gives a lot of references to values and what America is all about, what America stands for, and offers some changes to coincide with those values. So right or wrong, whether you agree with the things that are mentioned in these speeches or letters, certainly you can find a lot of these places in terms of where the values of America are and where you could go to study them further.